hour. For more on that and the U.S. presidential election, we go straight forward to Washington, D.C., where the Voice of America, Nova Purwadi, has been following the election. Nova, good evening to you.
Good morning.
Good morning to us right here in Jakarta. Yes. So, of course, this is the moment that we've been waiting for. The first speech after Joe Biden was projected the winner as the president-elect, the 46th president-elect of the United States. So what can we expect from this speech?
Well, it's interesting that since the election, Joe Biden has had several regular, almost daily speeches. The last of which was last night, which a lot of people had initially thought was going to be his victory speech, but it seems like his victory speech is what we're going to expect in an hour, now that the state of Pennsylvania has been called earlier today. Now, it's interesting, a lot of pundits would always say that the White House, whose address is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, often always has to go through Pennsylvania. And this ended up being the case in this election because the tipping point state ended up being Pennsylvania with its 20 electoral college votes, and also rather symbolic for Democrats because Pennsylvania had always been considered a Democratic stronghold, but it was lost to Democrats during the 2016 election when it swung for Donald Trump from the Republican Party. And of course, we saw in this election cycle, Joe Biden managed to resurrect the old blue wall, so-called, the Democratic Party-leaning states in the Midwest, including Michigan, Wisconsin, that had swung to Republicans also in the last election. Now, in his previous addresses, aside from addressing tangible issues such as COVID and also the economic impact of COVID, he also addressed the issue of polarization. Political polarization in the U.S. has gotten much worse and worse, and this is something that is very evident in this election. With a national tally, it's 70-something million versus, it's pretty much split down the middle among Americans. So half of Americans, roughly half, support Donald Trump, roughly half support Joe Biden. Of course, with the Electoral College, that ends up contributing to Electoral College votes very differently. But it's a very divided nation that almost lives in two different worlds. That's one thing that he is most likely to address. He touched upon it last night, that he would fight for both those who voted for him and who voted against him. Polarization, the polarization in the U.S. is not too dissimilar to the polarization in Indonesia with, you know, the bat versus tadpole dichotomy, Jebong and Kampret. So it's, you know, it seems like it's very existential. It's very different from the old days where, you know, Republicans would only believe in low taxes, and Democrats were seen as a party of high taxes, and, oh, I disagree on that, oh, I disagree too, let's have dinner. You know, that was the situation in previous elections. This election tried to get an American Jebong to speak to an American Kampret. It's very, very difficult, you know, to be even Facebook friends with them. So this kind of like polarization is something that Joe Biden is likely, you know, Joe Biden, who we can now call president-elect after he is being projected the winner, is likely to address. It's one of the more intangible issues facing America, aside from the more very tangible issues of economic downturn and also the devastation from COVID, and of course, you know, international policy, how to deal with the rising China, the internet, 5G, technological rivalry between the two big countries. Those things are tangible, but the intangible thing is this polarization that has put neighbor against neighbor, that
Yes.
is made for Thanksgiving's coming up. That's going to be awkward. If people still go
I
home
think-
for Thanksgiving.
No, but I think people are just more likely to speak with each other now because we already have a president-elect as opposed as before, you're in Biden camp, you're in Trump camp. But now because you have a president-elect, you can now coexist together even as families, right?
Well, at least there's certainty. At
Yes.
least there's certainty. Because for the past 5 days, there hasn't been certainty.
Right.
There hasn't been certainty because it's taken so long to count. Why has it taken so long? We've explained that it's because the mail-in ballots take a while to tally. Some states, like Pennsylvania, which ended up deciding this election pretty much, only started counting and tabulating on election day on November 3rd. Whereas many voters had already voted earlier. Now, this is also, to add to this mix, President Trump is alleging that the votes that are being tallied later somehow came out of thin air and are somehow illegal. And that's what he is telling his supporters on Twitter, which has notified, put notifications on such tweets saying that this might be misleading.
Correct.
Go find another source for this. And so, that adds to the level of polarization. And, some Republicans believe it, some Republicans don't. And, it's not really a clear-cut sort of polarization, because in this election, we've also seen people doing what's called split voting. So they would vote for a Democrat for president, and they would vote for, because along with the presidential election, they also have elections for all members of the House of Representatives and a third of the Senate, which this year was like 35. And sometimes people choose the Democratic candidate for president and then choose the Republican for Senate or House of Representatives.
Right.
They split their votes that way. So
that's interesting.
And this is shown because the Senate has maintained its Republican majority, pretty much projected, and also the Republicans have gained seats in the House of Representatives. Actually.
Nova, now I think we should talk about the Donald Trump side, right?
Of course.
We would like to know, is President Donald Trump expected to give a concession speech as in previous elections?
Well, that's a tradition in U.S. politics and U.S. elections. Not long after the election is called, usually the losing side, whether they're the incumbent or whether they are not yet president, they would address their supporters and tell them, look, we fought really hard, we thought we could win, but this is time to concede, and this is time to come together as a nation and to support my former opponent. That's the tradition, but President Trump has not said that in his speech. Early on on Wednesday, right after the elections, he started alleging this voter fraud, and then on Thursday he said illegal votes, and then he apparently got the news that the election had been projected for Biden while he was on a golf course in Virginia, not too far from Washington, D.C. And he tweeted several times. He said the election, this is not the end of the election. And he also alleged that the 70-something million votes that went to him were legal votes. So we don't know yet. And of course, he's launching several legal challenges in the courts. One of them is in Wisconsin, where the margin votes separating the two is in the under 1% of total votes. And in Georgia, it's even more tight, because Georgia is a Republican stronghold, and Joe Biden managed to lead there, but only by a few thousand. So that you can expect a recount, or at least a lawsuit to demand a recount there. And when you get to the nitty-gritty of a lot of these lawsuits, sometimes it's just a matter of how far can the Republican official stand, how far can he stand from the table where the votes are being tallied? 2 meters or 3 meters?
Okay.
3 meters is due to COVID and things like that. So this is what may make the final certification take more time than usual.
Yeah.
But yes, but we're not in a very usual election.
Some say it's
Okay.
organizing slowly, time-consuming for this
Election.
time of U.S.
Yes.
election. Maybe you have a bit question about
It's that meme, it's that meme from Titanic. It's been 84 years.
It's been 84 years.
That's what we're feeling.
Okay, Nova, since the world is excited about who is going to be the next president of United States of America, what is the mood around Washington, D.C. or other
Across the
cities?
nation, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you, sometimes you may hear honking behind me or cheering.
Yeah.
And that's been going on since noon DC time.
Wow.
DC is, of course, a Democratic stronghold.
Mm-hmm.
And from noon to the late evening, I guess it's still happening around the White House in
Yeah.
the area renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza. And you see a lot of jubilation, and it was certainly a contrast to the mood that was happening in DC, whether online,
Yeah.
on social media, or also in on the streets, because a lot of people felt a little deja vu of 2016 because because Democrats didn't get Texas nor Florida, and the voting seemed to indicate that the incumbent was going to win again. But it quickly changed when Pennsylvania and especially Georgia turned at least light blue. And of course, there was jubilation after that. But of course, in places where President Trump has strong support, there's also demonstrations suggesting that this is a stolen election, suggesting, they going by cue, following the cue from the president that a lot of these votes are illegal.
Yeah.
How could he be ahead than behind?
Right.
This is a conspiracy, all of those.
Thanks.
So there's, we'll look ahead how the situation is. And sometimes it's in the same city, in Philadelphia, where counting is underway for the
Right.
Pennsylvania
Well, Nova-
votes. You have Trump supporters and also
Right. Well, Nova,
Biden supporters
hopefully with
facing each other.
Thanksgiving, with holiday seasons coming in, we have whichever camps that you supported, we will become one, because we need a unified United States of America. Nova Porwadi, and of course to our colleagues in Voice of America in Washington, D.C., thank you very much for continuing the update of the U.S. election. Thank you, Nova.
Okay, after we heard the story